So we've been being awake to prosperity. That's what we've been being awake to this month. And as most of you will remember, we're using Edwene Gaines' 4 spiritual laws of prosperity. You can see I've had coffee while I read this. And to remind you what we're talking about is prosperity, it is moving forward in joy. And Edwene's definition is having a vital, alive body, having loving, juicy, that's my word, relationships that work all the time, and work that is meaningful, and all the money you can spend. Or as I like to say, as one of my teachers said, enough to spare and to share. And what that is really about, and I think Adina alluded to it beautifully, is that it is about that knowing, that consciousness of God present. That what I require, what I desire, is already being given by God, is already right there for me. That consciousness of Spirit's presence, that is at the heart of prosperity, is knowing God's presence and God's givingness right here, right now, right where I am. Now, the last 2 weeks, to review in 2 seconds, first week, we got it over quickly, was tithing. I didn't make it up. So many of the prosperity teachers say, give 10% of everything that comes into your life to where you are sped spiritually. Pray more to where you're fed spiritually. And sometimes that looks like this center. I hope that it does frequently. Sometimes it looks like an author. Sometimes it looks like a friend who gives you great spiritual listening and advice. But tithe, and it is that recognition of God as source. And that's where I say it's the just saying. That's what people over hundreds of years have said. That is the first key to abundance in our lives. The second, what we talked about last week, was setting clear goals, which isn't about, at this point I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to have my business, and then it's really about opening to be clear about what you most deeply desire. Because what we know as religious scientists is that that's when we give the law, that aspect of God that receives the habitual impress of our thoughts and acts upon it, that's what gives the law direction. We're always giving the law direction. Oh, that's going to be hard. Oh, I don't feel good. Oh, gee, I don't have enough time for this. We're always giving the law those directions for the law to say yes to. So we want to be sure that we give not just equal time, but more time to say, this is the desire of my heart for a meaningful, wonderful relationship, for an expansion of the abundance that I experience in my life, that we see it, we dwell in it, we experience it, and that gives the law direction. We don't do the call up the catalog company and say, well, you figure out what I want. We give it clear. So this week, we talk about something that I've certainly talked about before, but I haven't talked much about, and I might as well come down here, bring my Science of Mind text, since I can't look at my notes anyway. Something that I've talked about quite a bit, but never in terms of prosperity. So I love that this is what Edwene considers the 3rd spiritual law. And I'm always curious when this is my topic. This is one of those ones I'm always curious who shows up and who doesn't for this topic. And that is forgiveness. Now, I know many of you have heard my talks on forgiveness, have heard other people's talks on forgiveness. So if you're here today, there's some place somewhere that I trust that something is going to click for you. Something's new or different or tweaked, or there's some forgiveness that you didn't even have the awareness that you wanted to do or needed to do. What I always like to establish first when we talk about forgiveness is what it is and what it isn't. That forgiveness does not mean excusing what the other person did. It does not mean what they did was okay. It never means that. It does not mean that you need to continue if what this person did was really something pretty yucky or one of those serial toxic people. You don't have to keep a relationship with them. You don't have to keep them in your life. You certainly don't need to lie down before them and let them walk all over you again. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is allowing them safe passage through your mind. So that when this person comes up in your mind, you don't hate vibe them with your thoughts as if you were at a shooting gallery at the county fair and they're That's what forgiveness is. It's not putting them out of your heart. So that's what forgiveness is and isn't. And the other thing that we remember is that forgiveness is not for them. It is not for them. It is for us. And why is it for us? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons. And here's some that were new ways to think about it from Edwene that I liked. And she said, when we harbor a grudge, when we harbor that resentment, it takes away our peace of mind. Because you know how it is. You're sitting there cranking. Oh, that person did that. And as you keep going over it and keep rubbing it into yourself, you're agitated. You don't have the true peace of mind. And as we continue to hold on to that resentment, this was very interesting. And see if this runs true for you. As we keep those resentments alive in our heart, there's a part of us who, kind of knows better, who then feels unworthy to receive the gifts of God. So, do you see how that would work? That part of us knows that this forgiveness thing is what we need to be doing. And so when we've got this judgment and condemnation in our heart, then we don't open ourselves. We don't open ourselves to the desires of our heart because we know that there's something that's not okay. The trickiest, but to me most profound reason to forgive is that it takes us out of victimhood. When we keep the lack of forgiveness, we have to keep the depth of our wound. We can't withhold forgiveness without at the same time hanging on to the damage that we believe they did to us. And when we are willing to forgive and write a new story for ourselves, then that's the way we take our power back. And that's the way we step out of victimhood. So many of us, not necessarily anybody in this room, but so many of us had someone do something dreadful, hurt us. And for the rest of our lives, we're telling everybody how because of what that person did, I am damaged, and so I'm never going to forgive them. Well, that's reasonable, but what that means is we have to hang on to claiming ourselves as damaged. And That's not the truth of us. The truth of us is there is a place in us that has never been damaged or hurt. But in order to claim that, in order to step out, get our power back, and claim our wholeness, we need to stop resenting that person. And well, I'll talk about that later. And that's the biggest thing, because I do know that some people have been hurt, were hurt badly, savagely as children. So we think, how can I forgive that person? All I know is that the choice to not cling to whatever damage seemed to have been done to us, to step out into our power, restores something to us. We get the inner wholeness restored more fully. So to me, that's the most profound. And if some of you have some of that you'd like to talk through and yeah-but with, that would be a great thing to come to the workshop for. It would also be a great thing to see a practitioner for. Not for the 5 minutes after service. Call, make an appointment for that. Some of the other reasons to forgive have to do with the fact that Jesus told us to, and he must have known something. He's kind of a big spiritual teacher. And when Edwene talks about it, she says, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. You don't like it, it's hard, you just got to do it. It doesn't feel good. And I kind of have a difference of opinion about that. Because I know that those places where I don't forgive, they're closed down places in my heart. And if I pay attention, I can feel them. I can feel them as places where light doesn't come through, where love doesn't come through, places where I feel closed up. So while sometimes forgiving isn't easy, when I am willing to let my heart open back up, that does feel better. Because that is our natural state of being. To be loving. That is who we are at depth. So when we go out of alignment with that, with our resentments and our judgments and stuff, we don't feel right because we're out of alignment with the truth of who we are. The truth of who we are. That heart, that closed down heart, and that one, Edwene also ties up forgiveness and resentment with our compelling, for some of us, not everyone, I'll just talk about myself, sometimes compelling need to judge. To judge, I don't like, why'd they do that? That's really dumb. Why'd they do that in the car? Man, you could be judging and criticizing people all day long. And when we have that heart that is so ready to condemn, I'm reminding you, what does that bring back? Edwene quotes Catherine Ponder, who's a great prosperity teacher in the Unity tradition. And she said, and this sounds very much like something our old friend Emma Curtis Hopkins, the Nike woman of New Thought, and teacher of Ernest Holmes, said, Catherine Ponder said that the world is a record of our thoughts. The world is a record of our thoughts. So that condemning heart, that anxious, critical, judgmental mind becomes a magnet for trouble. Whereas when we have the understanding heart, then we draw to us love, joy, and all the gifts of God. So once again, we understand forgiveness is for us. It is about cleansing our hearts. It is about doing an internal cleanup, clear out, so that we are open to receive that which we so love to receive. Here's what Ernest Holmes said. One of the things he said. He doesn't talk about forgiveness all that much. He just pretty much says two things. God always forgives. God sees nothing to forgive. Which somebody challenged me on once. Said, well, how's that the same thing? It amounts to the same thing. God sees nothing to forgive, and God's always forgiving. So Holmes says, the mind which condemns understands not the truth of being. And the heart which would shut the door of its bosom to one who is mistaken strangles its own life, closing its eyes to a greater vision. The heart which would shut the door to one who is mistaken, one who screwed up, strangles its own life, closing its eyes to a greater vision. The biggest life is the one which includes the most. And when he says that, he means when we include the most in our circle of love, when we don't keep looking for those people who are outside of it. So then the question is, how do we forgive? Well, for me, when I first started learning about the truth about what forgiveness is and what it isn't, and when I sort of learned the whys of it, sometimes that just helps me drop things right away. This isn't hurting me, it's not hurting them, it's hurting me. And remember that great thing, that whole harboring grudges and resentment is like eating poison and expecting the other person to die. We're the one with the closed down heart and the high blood pressure when we think of that person. We're the ones sending toxins through our bodies and go, oh, they're so, not them. So sometimes just enlightened self-interest is all we need to start moving forward. And initially, it takes a choice. We make the choice to forgive, and we can affirm that. We can say, I choose to forgive everyone and everything. Or I choose to forgive Sally Jones, whoever she was. I choose to forgive. I open my heart. We can do those kinds of affirmations. We can move through the understanding that a lot of the people, and this is for little resentments, a lot of the people that we are judging and condemning are those people who did not receive the copy of our Rules for Life book or our How to Be Appropriate in the World book. You know what I'm talking about? Edwene knows she has one, and I realize I have one. It comes up mostly when I'm driving, when I see people do certain things. I go, well, on page 37, section 8 in the Liz Mirante rule book for how to drive, that was not that. Or how to dress, or how to be a good guest, or how to, you all have your own lists for how people should behave. Our own rule books. And so once we realize that my rule book did not get disseminated across the planet, and your rule book did not get disseminated across the planet, and while we probably have overlap, there are some places we don't. And so recognizing that, and recognizing ultimately that what most people do is none of our business. And we need to attend to, I don't particularly love this metaphor. This is what Edwene, in the Deep South, her dad said, Edwene, attend to your own rat killing. It's a lovely image to take from church. I like the keep it on your side of the road, keep in your own car. But those things are all helpful to remind us, and help us step into forgiveness because the reasons to do it seem really compelling. But there comes a person, an incident in so many of our lives that we say, this one, I can forgive those daily things. I can forgive this person who just always says the first thing that comes out of their mouth. I know somehow they were created that way. I can get that. I can let that go. In fact, I can learn to let that person be my teacher and know that a lot of the people that step on my toes are probably sent to teach me something about that greater heart, that understanding heart, that compassionate heart. It's that idea that life is always for us. And there comes a time, and so for some of us, it could be something that happened early in life, where there was something so big and major that we may have the desire to forgive, but it just seems so huge. It seems so huge. How can I forgive that person for what they did? And that's when you pull in the big guns or the big gun. You don't try to do it yourself. You don't try to force yourself. What you do is ask God to forgive through you. That you use those powerful words, that powerful choice, as an opening to let it be done through you. Because as we know, God doesn't see it. God says, you irrevocably damaged? Huh? No, you're perfect, you're whole and complete now because God knows the spiritual truth of each of us. Sure, I can be bigger love than you even know through you. So that's ultimately what I think we are called to do. I think everything in life that challenges us is that call to go, you know what? I don't have to try to get at this through my own human personality. That's what God is for. That's what an awareness of God is for us to lay down our littleness and open to something bigger. Bigger than our human view of what's working and not working in my life, what's okay and not okay in my life, what's damaging my life, to open up to knowing that God is greater even than this perception of injury on my part. And this works the same when the major thing we have to forgive is ourselves. Because I know for many of us, we know about forgiving other people, but we somehow don't let ourselves off the hook. Which, in case you haven't heard this or read this before, I do need to let you know that Eric Butterworth said, God doesn't see our sin, our mistake, our errors. So if we're hanging on to condemning ourselves, that's just spiritual arrogance. Wait, God's not doing the job, so I better be mad at myself. Somebody's got to be more, What is that? And Edwene says, in fact, now think about this, that we have to get used to, simply have to get used to, being in a state of being constantly forgiven. Because that spirit is either always forgiving or never sees a fault in the first place. That can we make that step to allow ourselves to be forgiven all the time? Doesn't mean we don't make amends when we need to. Doesn't mean we don't try to clean up our act. But as we grow spiritually, we do become more aware of the little ways we hurt and injure people, the ways we are unkind, the ways we judge. Look at them. Oh, quiet down, quiet down. And hanging on to self-condemnation tightens up our journey and slows us down when we can extend that same understanding, compassionate heart to ourselves, or step out of the way and let God extend that love to ourselves. Then we have so much more spaciousness for everybody in the world. So much more spaciousness and such a bigger place through which to be love. And so that's what forgiveness is. A place to be more love for ourselves and for the world. As I said, if there is something you're going, but mine is, but this is, but how do I come to the workshop? Call up a practitioner. Because this is important to have as free and open a heart as you can for your health, for how you walk in the world, and for your opening to the good that God is always wanting to give us. So let's go within. And I am so grateful to know that there is always a greater power within me to do the work. That there is that infinite, inexhaustible, unconditional love. That is God. Go where I might to any spiritual teaching around the world, there is an agreement that God is love. It is a secret, or it was a secret, that Jesus brought into the world the message that God is love, closer than hands and feet, closer to us, always welcoming, always loving. Like the prodigal son, no matter what we may have done, we are always welcomed into that huge heart of God. And so knowing this heart of God is really the truth of who I am. I stand ready to release petty judgments, petty ideas, big grudges, large and small. I stand ready to release them. I make the choice to let them go so that I may experience the gifts of an open, joyful, grateful heart. And I claim right here and right now that any forgiving that looks too difficult, I simply know that there is that power and presence that is greater even than that wound and than that hurt, than that betrayal. There is a love and a power greater than that. And I open myself and declare it to move through me now. And forgive what I of myself cannot see the way to, that God knows how to do that. And so I open and I am willing to know that it is done. That every wound, every hurt, every shaming, I can now make the choice to let go of as I allow the presence to open my heart. And as I do this, I feel that spaciousness and that peace and that wholeness and that love that is the truth of my very being. I am so grateful that this is so. And I release this word knowing that the law moves upon it and brings back the manifestation into my life. And so it is.